I remember the day my father died like it was yesterday. I was only 18 years old, barely an adult myself. My mother was completely lost in her grief, barely able to get out of bed most days. My younger siblings, Tom and Rebecca, were just kids at the time. Tom was 13 and Rebecca had just turned 11. They needed stability. They needed someone to take care of them, someone to make sure life kept moving forward. I looked around at my broken family, and I realized something that changed everything. Someone had to be the strong one. Someone had to hold us all together. And that someone was going to be me, whether I was ready for it or not. I had to grow up overnight, had to put away my own grief and fears. There was no other choice. The decision I made next changed the entire course of my life. I had a college acceptance letter sitting in my bedroom drawer, a full scholarship to study education. It was my dream, my ticket to a better future. But dreams don't pay bills, and dreams don't put food on the table. I carefully folded that acceptance letter, placed it back in the drawer, and closed it. Then I went out and got a job as a receptionist at a small factory on the outskirts of town. The pay was barely enough to survive on, but it was steady work with benefits. I came home that night and made a promise to my family. I looked my mother in the eyes and told her I would take care of them no matter what it took. I would make sure Tom and Rebecca had everything they needed to succeed. That promise became my whole world. For the next 10 years, I lived for my family. Every single month, without fail, I sent money home. I paid for groceries, for utilities, for school supplies. When Tom got accepted to law school, I paid his tuition. When Rebecca wanted to go to dental school, I worked overtime for months to make sure she could go. I was so incredibly proud of both of them. Tom graduated at the top of his class and got a job at a prestigious firm. Rebecca opened her own dental practice in the nicest part of the city. They were living the dreams I had given up. My own dreams were still sitting in that drawer, collecting dust and fading with time. I told myself it was worth it. I told myself that their success was my success. But deep down, late at night when I was alone, I wondered if anyone would ever see the sacrifice I had made for them. Everything started to change after Rebecca graduated and opened her practice. At first, I didn't notice it. The calls asking for money stopped, which I thought was a good sign. It meant they were finally stable, finally independent. But then something else stopped too. The invitations to family dinners disappeared. The weekly phone calls from my mother became monthly, then stopped altogether. When I called them, the conversations were short and awkward. They were always busy, always rushing off to something more important. I felt a cold distance growing between us, like ice slowly forming on a lake. I didn't understand why. I had done everything for them. I had sacrificed my entire life so they could have theirs. But now, when they didn't need me anymore, I felt like I was disappearing from their lives. The feeling hurt more than I wanted to admit. I finally decided to visit them for Christmas. I hadn't seen anyone in person for almost 2 years. I drove my old car, the same one I had been driving for 12 years, all the way to my childhood home. When I arrived, I could see immediately how much had changed. The house had been renovated. There was a new luxury car in the driveway. Everything looked expensive and perfect. But the way they looked at me made my stomach turn. Tom made a joke about my old car, asking if it was a vintage collector's item. Rebecca commented on my worn-out winter coat, suggesting I should treat myself sometime. My mother just sighed heavily and said nothing, but her eyes were full of disappointment when she looked at me. I sat at that dinner table, surrounded by my family, and felt like a complete stranger in my own home. Like I didn't belong there anymore. The worst moment of my life came a few months later. I had been thinking about it for years, building up the courage, saving what little money I could. I finally decided to tell my mother that I wanted to adopt a child. I was so excited. My heart was racing as I explained my plan. I was 35 years old, financially stable enough, and I desperately wanted to start my own family. I wanted to give a child the love and home they deserved. I wanted to finally have something that was mine, someone to love who might love me back. But my mother's reaction destroyed me. She looked at me with this expression, this mixture of pity and disgust. Then she said words I will never forget. "A child needs stability," she said coldly. "You can barely support yourself. How could you possibly take care of a child?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. They shattered my heart into pieces. I cried for an entire week after that conversation. I cried for the dreams I had given up. I cried for the family that didn't appreciate me. I cried for the version of myself I had lost somewhere along the way. But then, something shifted inside me. On the 8th day, I stopped crying. I looked around at my small apartment, at my simple life, and I made a decision. I was done living for people who didn't see my worth. I was done sacrificing myself for people who made me feel worthless. I packed my bags, every single thing I owned. I moved to a new city hundreds of miles away, a place where nobody knew me, where I could start completely fresh. I left with a broken heart, but also with $5,000 I had saved, and more importantly, with a new determination. It was finally time to build a life where I was wanted, where I mattered. Starting over in a new city was terrifying, but also liberating. I took a job at a large warehouse, working in their logistics department. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it. I learned everything I could about the supply business, about inventory management, about distribution networks. I absorbed information like a sponge. During the day, I worked hard at the warehouse. But at night, sitting at my small kitchen table, I started making business plans. I filled notebooks with ideas, with calculations, with dreams. My dream of having a family, of adopting a child, hadn't died. Instead, it transformed into something else. It became a fire inside me, a driving force that pushed me to work harder than I ever had before. I was going to build something real, something substantial. I was going to create a life that proved my mother wrong about everything. 2 years after moving to the new city, I did it. I adopted my first son. His name was Michael, and he was 6 years old when he came to live with me. He was a scared, quiet little boy who had been through more trauma than any child should ever experience. He barely spoke for the first month. He flinched when I moved too quickly. He didn't trust me, didn't trust anyone. But I was patient. I showed him every single day that he was safe, that he was loved, that he was wanted. I made him a promise, holding his small hands in mine. I told him he would never feel unloved again, never feel abandoned again. And he became my reason for everything. He was why I worked even harder. He was why I pushed myself past exhaustion. Every decision I made, every risk I took, was for his future. He deserved the world, and I was going to give it to him. When Michael was 8, I made the biggest gamble of my life. I used all my savings, every single dollar I had managed to scrape together, and started my own company. I called it Keystone Supplies. The name represented what I wanted to be, the foundation that others could build on. At first, it was just me working out of a tiny office that was barely bigger than a closet. I had one desk, one computer, one phone line, and a dream that felt impossibly big. I made cold calls all day. I sent emails all night. I drove across the state to meet potential clients, leaving Michael with a trusted babysitter. There were so many times I wanted to give up, so many times I thought I had made a terrible mistake. But every time I felt like quitting, I would come home and see Michael's face. I would think about the future I wanted to give him. And I kept going. Every sale was for my son's future. Every contract was for our life together. The business grew slowly over the next few years, but it did grow. We moved into a real office. I hired my first employee, then my second and third. Money was still tight, but we were making it work. And then something amazing happened. When Michael was 12, I adopted my second son, Daniel. He was 9 years old, brilliant, and endlessly curious. He was always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked, why things happened. He brought a completely different energy to our little family. A few years after that, I adopted Joseph. He was 7, a ball of pure energy who never stopped moving, never stopped laughing. He played soccer from morning until night, wearing holes in his shoes. With 3 boys, our home was loud and chaotic and messy. But it was also full of love, full of laughter, full of life. My family was finally complete. These boys were mine, and I was theirs. We belonged to each other. I raised my 3 sons with every ounce of love I had in my heart. We didn't have much money in those early years. We lived in a modest house. We bought clothes from thrift stores. We had simple meals and homemade birthday cakes. But what we lacked in money, we made up for in love and presence. I taught them to work hard for what they wanted. I taught them to be kind to others, especially to people who were struggling. I taught them that family wasn't about blood, it was about who showed up, who stayed, who loved you when things got difficult. I taught them to never give up on their dreams, no matter how impossible those dreams seemed. Most importantly, I showed them every single day that they were wanted, that they were valued, that they mattered. I never wanted them to feel the way my own family had made me feel. They deserved better than that. They deserved everything. As the boys grew older, something incredible started happening with Keystone Supplies. We landed a huge contract with a national retailer, the kind of deal that changed everything overnight. Suddenly, we weren't a small local company anymore. We were competing with major players in the industry. I hired a great team of talented people who believed in our vision. The company exploded in size. Within 5 years, we had offices in 3 states. We employed over 200 people. Michael graduated from college with a business degree and joined the company. He was sharp, ambitious, and full of fresh ideas. Together, we transformed Keystone Supplies into something neither of us had dreamed possible. When he was just 26 years old, Michael became our CEO. I stepped back into an advisory role, but I was still the owner, still the founder. Watching my son lead the company I had built was one of the proudest moments of my entire life. My other 2 sons found their own paths to success, and they were just as impressive. Daniel earned a full academic scholarship to one of the best universities in the country. He studied environmental science and became a researcher working on clean water projects in developing countries. He was published in major scientific journals before he even turned 25. His work was saving lives, making a real difference in the world. And Joseph, my energetic soccer-loving boy, his talent took him further than any of us imagined. He played in college on a full athletic scholarship. Then he got recruited to play professionally. By the time he was 23, he was playing for the national team, representing our country in international competitions. I went to every game I could, screaming in the stands, crying tears of pride. All 3 of my sons were successful, but more importantly, they were good men. Kind men. That mattered more to me than any achievement. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, something extraordinary happened. A letter arrived at my office, delivered by regular mail. I opened it casually, expecting a bill or some business correspondence. But when I saw what it was, my hands started trembling. It was an invitation to my mother's 60th birthday party. I stared at that invitation for almost an hour, just sitting at my desk, reading it over and over. For 25 years, I had heard nothing from them. Not a phone call on my birthday. Not a card at Christmas. Complete silence, like I had never existed at all. And now this. A part of me was angry. How dare they reach out now after all these years? But another part of me, the part that was still that hurt 18-year-old girl, felt something else. Pain. Longing. A desperate need for closure. I took the invitation home and showed it to my sons. They knew the whole story of my past. I had never hidden it from them. My sons and I sat around our dining table that night, discussing what I should do. Michael held my hand across the table, his grip strong and reassuring. "Mom," he said, looking directly into my eyes, "it's time they see what you built. It's time they see who you really are." Daniel nodded in agreement. "You've carried their rejection for 25 years, he said quietly. "Maybe it's time to put it down." Joseph, always the most emotional of the three, had tears in his eyes. "They don't deserve you, Mom. But maybe you deserve closure." Their words hit me hard. They were right. I had spent so many years running from that pain, hiding from my past. But I couldn't heal what I wouldn't face. I needed to go back. I needed to close that old, painful chapter of my life once and for all. So I made my decision. I would attend my mother's birthday party. And I would do it with my head held high. I went shopping for a gift for my mother. I spent hours trying to find something perfect, something that would show her I had done well for myself. Finally, I found it in an exclusive jewelry store downtown. It was a rare blue diamond necklace, absolutely stunning. The stones caught the light in the most beautiful way. It was expensive, the kind of expensive that would have been impossible for the old me. But I could afford it now. I could afford anything I wanted. I bought the necklace and had it wrapped in beautiful paper. I suppose a part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, still wanted her approval. Still wanted her to look at me with pride instead of disappointment. Still wanted her to see that I had become someone worthy of respect. It was a foolish hope, maybe. But it was there, burning quietly in my heart, refusing to die completely no matter how much time had passed. The day of the party arrived. I drove to my childhood home, the same house I had left 25 years before. Everything looked different. The neighborhood had become wealthy. The houses were all renovated and expanded. When I pulled up to my mother's house, I just sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. The house looked like something from a magazine now. Expensive landscaping, professional lighting, a fountain in the front yard. Walking up to that front door felt like stepping into a ghost story. I rang the doorbell, holding the gift box in my hands. When the door opened, I stepped inside and was immediately overwhelmed. The house was full of expensive furniture, designer decorations, original artwork on the walls. All of it paid for with the success I had helped create, the education I had funded. And there they were. My mother, Tom, Rebecca. They all turned to look at me. For a moment, nobody spoke. They just stared at me like I was a ghost they had never expected to see again. My sister Rebecca was the first one to break the silence. She walked over to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, look who finally crawled out of her hole," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The others laughed, that same uncomfortable laughter from my childhood. They started asking questions, but they were really insults disguised as concern. They asked if I was still working as a receptionist. They commented on my simple dress, suggesting I must have gotten it on sale. Tom asked if I was still driving that old car, the one he had made fun of years ago. The old insults were all still there, just quieter now, more subtle. They made me feel small again, worthless again. My mother stood in the corner, saying nothing, but watching me with that same look of disappointment I remembered so well. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run back to my car and drive away. But I had promised myself I would see this through. I took a deep breath and approached my mother. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. I handed her the beautifully wrapped gift. Everyone gathered around as she opened it, curious to see what the poor sister had brought. She pulled away the wrapping paper carefully. She opened the velvet box. And there it was, the blue diamond necklace, sparkling brilliantly under the lights. For a moment, there was complete silence. Everyone stared at the necklace. It was clearly expensive, clearly real. But then Tom started laughing, a cruel sound that made my stomach turn. "Nice costume jewelry," he sneered, his voice full of mockery. "You really shouldn't have wasted your money on a fake like that. We know you can't afford the real thing." Rebecca joined in, examining the necklace with exaggerated suspicion. "It does look pretty cheap up close," she said. "The stones are probably just glass." They were all laughing now, passing the necklace around like it was a joke. My mother took the necklace from Rebecca and placed it on the coffee table like it was a piece of trash, something that didn't deserve to be touched. "It's very shiny, dear," she said, her voice absolutely dripping with condescension. "Thank you for thinking of me." The words were polite, but the tone was poison. The humiliation burned through me. My cheeks flushed red. My hands started shaking. I felt like that 18-year-old girl again, small and worthless and invisible. They had dismissed my gift without even considering it might be real. They had dismissed me, just like they always had. I turned toward the door, ready to leave, ready to get out of there before I broke down completely. I had made a mistake coming here. I had been foolish to think anything would be different. I should have known better. I should have known they would never see me as anything more than the family failure. I reached for the door handle, my vision blurring with tears. Just as my hand touched the door, we heard a sound outside. The low rumble of expensive engines pulling into the driveway. One car, then two, then three. Everyone in the room froze. Through the front window, we could see three incredibly luxurious cars parking in front of the house. They were the kind of cars you only saw in magazines or movies. Sleek, black, and absolutely stunning. Everyone rushed to the window, pressing against the glass, whispering frantically to each other. Who were these important guests? Why were they here? Rebecca was practically hanging out the window trying to see. Tom was on his phone, probably trying to Google the car models to figure out how much they cost. My mother straightened her dress and fixed her hair, preparing to meet whoever these important people were. I stood by the door, forgotten again, watching them all scramble. I knew exactly who was in those cars. My heart started pounding, but this time it wasn't from fear or humiliation. It was from pride. The front door opened, and there they were. My three sons stepped inside, one after another. Michael entered first, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than everything in my mother's house combined. He was commanding, confident, every inch the successful CEO. He looked around the room until his eyes found mine. Then he smiled, that warm smile that always made everything better. "Sorry we're late, Mom," he said loudly, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. The Keystone jet was delayed. The moment he said Keystone, the entire room went completely still. Everyone knew that name. Keystone Supplies was one of the largest distribution companies in the country. It was in the news constantly. It was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And my son had just called me Mom. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Everyone was staring at me now, at Michael, trying to understand what was happening. Trying to make sense of this impossible situation. Daniel walked in next, still in his travel clothes from his flight. He came straight over and hugged me tight. "We wanted to be here to celebrate you, Mom," he said warmly. Then he pulled out his phone and held it up for everyone to see. On the screen was a news article about his latest achievement. He had just won a major international award for his clean water research project. The headline called him a pioneering scientist changing the world. Rebecca's mouth fell open. She stared at the phone, then at Daniel, then at me. Finally, Joseph bounded in wearing his national team jacket, the official uniform he wore for international competitions. He was grinning widely, that same joyful energy he had always had. He walked right over and put his arm around my shoulders. "Yeah," he said, looking around at my stunned family. "We couldn't let them be mean to our mom." The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. Pure shock, disbelief, confusion. Their minds were trying to process what they were seeing, but couldn't make it make sense. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She was stuttering, unable to form complete sentences. Your mom," she finally managed to say. "Keystone." She looked from my son's proud, protective faces to the blue diamond necklace still sitting on the coffee table where she had dismissed it. I watched as the realization crashed down on her like a wave. The woman she had called too poor to adopt children, the daughter she had been ashamed of, the sister they had mocked for 25 years, was the owner and founder of Keystone Supplies. The necklace she had called cheap costume jewelry was worth more than her entire house. The children I had been told I couldn't support were now more successful than anyone in this room. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and I felt the strangest sensation. Peace. Not anger, not bitterness, just quiet, powerful peace. My son stood beside me, solid and real and proud. Tom and Rebecca looked like they might faint. My mother reached for the necklace with shaking hands, finally understanding what she had thrown away. But it was too late. They had offered me love too late, respect too late, family too late. I already had everything I needed standing right beside me. I had built my own family, one that chose me, that valued me, that loved me unconditionally. And that was worth more than any apology they could ever give. I smiled at my sons, took their hands, and walked out of that house for the last time. I was finally completely free.